attempted murder, deception, betrayal, infidelity. Here's my review of Disclaimer series on Apple Plus TV, episodes 1 to 7. I haven't read the book this series is based on, and I haven't seen any of the trailers or read anything about this series, so I'm going in cold. There are 3 separate stories going on here in episode 1, and they all seem to be connected to each other. There's Catherine, played by Kate Blanchett. She's a journalist and very well respected in her field. There's her husband, Robert, played by Sacha Baron Cohen, and they have a 25-year-old son, Nicholas, played by Cody Smith-McPhee. Catherine receives an anonymous letter in the mail, and inside the mail is an unpublished novel. She reads it, and she's convinced that whoever wrote this unpublished novel, it's about her life, and she has a meltdown. She doesn't have a close relationship with her son, but her husband Robert does have a nice relationship with him, and it's not really explained why in this episode why he is so repulsed by his mother. We meet a young couple from London who are a very young, obnoxious couple from London who are in Italy on their first trip overseas, and Nicholas, played by Lewis Partridge, and Sasha, played by Liv Hill. Sasha receives a phone call while she's in Italy that there's been a death in the family, so she heads back to London while Nicholas stays alone in Italy. And finally, there is Stephen, played by Kevin Kline. He's a school teacher who's been teaching for over 50 years, and he's pretty much over the job. He's had enough of the job. It's just become repetitive for him. His wife passed away 9 years ago from cancer, and he hasn't really gotten over the death of his wife, and he hasn't really thrown away her belongings, and he's just kind of drudging through life with no purpose. One day, Stephen is going through his wife's belongings, and he finds an envelope full of photos, and he seems to recognize the people in these photos. The photos are of that young, obnoxious London couple from previously in the episode, and he also finds some photos of a naked woman amongst these photos, and he doesn't know who this woman is. He also finds an unpublished novel with the photos, and once he reads the novel, he quickly finds out that his wife wrote the novel and that this is about Catherine. He seems to know that this novel is about Catherine, and he decides in this episode to publish a novel himself as some kind of revenge against Catherine. The final scene in episode 1 is Jonathan in a flashback. He's by himself in Italy. He's lying on the beach, and he sees a woman, the same woman that's naked in the photos. He sees her on the beach in a bikini, in a swimsuit, playing near the water with her son. My first impressions of this series so far is not very good. I just found the slowly teasing of the details very confusing. I wasn't really sure what's going on. It makes more sense by the end of the episode, but I just felt frustrated the whole time. I didn't know which scenes were set in the present time, in the past, in the future, and I didn't know who anybody was or who they're connected to, so it was a little bit confusing. There's occasionally some narration in this episode, sometimes by Kevin Kline, his character, Stephen, and sometimes by whoever wrote the unpublished novel, and it just felt very condescending, and the narration wasn't really necessary. Stephen, played by Kevin Kline, he has the most fleshed out role in episode 1. We don't really get to know much about Catherine and Jonathan in this episode. Anyway, first impressions are a little bit so-so, so on to episode 2. Episode 2 is structured differently from episode 1. We don't see the young, obnoxious London couple in this episode. Perhaps we'll never see them again. And we just see Stephen for a very short scene in this episode. He pretends to be a customer at Nicholas's job. Nicholas works at a electronic type shop, like they sell like appliances like fridges and vacuum cleaners and stuff like that, and TVs. And Stephen goes in, pretending to be like a really old man, and pretends to be via a vacuum cleaner. And then at the last moment, he changes his mind, and before he leaves behind a envelope addressed to Nicholas. And we assume that in this envelope is the same naked photos of his mother. Episode 2 mainly focuses on Catherine and Robert. Catherine is desperately trying to find out who could have written this unpublished novel. We get a short flashback scene of Catherine meeting Nancy, Stephen's wife, played by Leslie Manville. They meet in a cafe. We're not sure when it's set exactly. It must be before she got sick, before she got cancer. But they meet in a cafe, and Nancy has many questions for Catherine about the death of her son. Why did you lie to the police about your relationship with my son? And then Catherine eventually doesn't want to answer any more questions, and she storms out of the cafe. Stephen delivers an envelope to Robert's workplace, and eventually, before he goes home, Robert opens this envelope and he sees naked photos, the same ones we saw earlier, of his wife, and he's very, very shocked. He recognizes the location in the photos. He realizes that his wife was cheating on him when they were on a holiday in Italy, because he had to leave the holiday early to go back to England for work, and Catherine and Nicholas stayed back in Italy, and Robert's very shocked by these photos. The final scene in the episode is Robert's, because Catherine prepared a dinner for them, and Robert's not answering his phone, and he's kind of gone missing for a few hours, and then because he's upset about the photos, he's trying to think what's going on. Eventually he goes home and he confronts Catherine about these photos, and there's a bit of a fight, a bit of a discussion, and Catherine tries to explain, but Robert ends up storming out of the house, and that's the end of the episode. Episode 2 is an improvement over the first episode, but I still have my issues with this series. Cate Blanchett is an actress I love usually in everything she does, but in this episode I found her just too over the top with her mannerisms, and like when she gets upset, she like just becomes upset and distraught so quickly, and just her face and hand mannerisms are just a little bit too over the top. Yeah, I found a little bit too on the nose. The narration in this episode is even more annoying. In this episode, I just really hated it when it's clear how these characters are feeling. We can see it in their performances, but the narration insists on telling us how they're feeling, and it's just not necessary. There's still 5 episodes to go in this series, but it just feels like it's a little bit overblown, a little bit overwrought for the story. I mean, I don't understand how they're going to stretch 7 episodes, this story. It just feels like while in Italy, Catherine had an affair with Nicholas, and she has some kind of power of him because she's older than him, and he's very young, just a teenager. And there's some kind of accident where he passed away, and then she just wanted to forget about it, and that's it. So, yeah, hopefully there's more to this story, but at this stage, the story is not seems a bit overdone. But the final scene of the film between Catherine and Robert was very thrilling, very entertaining, and very well acted. So hopefully we get more of that in future episodes. Anyway, on to episode 3. Episode 3 starts off with Robert in his car driving off after he looks very upset after the confrontation with his wife, Catherine. He pulls his car over, he starts drinking in his car on the side of the road, and then he passes out from drinking too much, and he sleeps in his car overnight, and then eventually in the next morning he realizes he's had too much to drink, so he catches a bus to work. And that's the last we see of Robert in this episode. There's also another quick scene set in the present time with Stephen. His book is already published, and he's with his book publisher, and he's visiting a bookstore, and he's insisting that his book be predominantly displayed all over the shop. So we assume this shop has some kind of significance to him, or somebody will see the book in his shop. Catherine leaves a message on Stephen's phone. He finds out that probably Nancy or Stephen wrote the book, so she calls him on his phone and leaves a message on his answering machine that this novel is a work of fiction, and that please this needs to stop. The rest of this episode are flashback scenes. After meeting at the beach and talking, Nicholas and Catherine in Italy, they meet at the bar to have some drinks, and then they sit at a table, and then Catherine starts seducing Nicholas, a very inexperienced Nicholas, and then she invites him to her hotel room, and then once he's in her hotel room, she continues to seduce him even more. Later in the episode, sometime later after this flashback scene, Stephen and Nancy are at home, and they get, while Jonathan's on holiday in Italy, they get a knock on the door, and it's police at the door, and the police coming, and they inform Stephen and Nancy that their son has died in a drowning accident while on holiday in Italy. They both fly to Italy because they have to verify the identity of the body. They go to the hotel where he was staying. They visit the beach where he drowned, and we find out that Catherine, Nicholas, and Catherine's son were all at the beach when Nicholas was in the water, and Jonathan had to go into the water to save him. This episode is probably the weakest so far. It's just going through the motions. All of the fears that I had at the end of episode 2 are starting to come true. I could still be wrong. There could still be some twists and turns coming, but the story is unfolding exactly the way I thought it was going to. So it's just becoming a little bit tedious to sit through. But luckily, the quality of the acting and is strong enough to keep me entertained at least. I found the fact that Nancy, while on the beach, when they visited in the beach, she already thinks that Catherine has some kind of involvement with her son. There's no way she could know this, and just felt like a clumsy and a contrived way to push the story forward, and a contrived way to connect the characters. Thankfully, in this episode, the narration is very, very limited, so that was a relief. Anyway, on to episode 4. Episode 4 is a very uneventful episode until the last couple of scenes of the episode. The younger Catherine and Jonathan continue their affair while in Italy. Stephen's novel seems to be selling very well, and he has some ideas that maybe he wants to write a second novel and stir up even more trouble. The older Catherine, Kate Blanchett, she finally goes into that bookstore from a previous episode, and she sees the unpublished novel, which is now published. She sees it plastered all over the bookshop, and she's read it already, so she goes into a panic and she runs out of the bookstore. Robert kicks out Catherine out of the family home. He packs her suitcase for her, and she kicks her out of the house, and he books a taxi and plane for her, and he tells their son that Catherine has a new job overseas, a new assignment, so she's going to be gone for a while. Jonathan tells the young Catherine that he is in love with her and that he wanted to come back and to London with her and be with her, and she can get divorced and they can be in love. But Catherine thinks that it's just like a holiday romance, so she tries to break it off. Young Catherine, she falls asleep on the beach, and while she's sleeping, Nicholas goes into the water. They have like a little dinghy boat, and he goes into the water, but the water is very strong, and he gets dragged out. And Catherine wakes up and she sees that Nicholas is not next to her. He's missing, and then she looks out into the water, and she starts in a panic. And then Jonathan is sleeping on the beach about 10-20 meters away from her, and he wakes up and he quickly runs into the water to try and save him. And he manages to push a young Nicholas back towards the beach, and has a few other men helping them as well. But everybody seems to forget about Jonathan. He gets pulled out further towards the ocean, and we can see like he has no chance of getting back. And then he gets pulled under the water, and eventually some people from the beach, they go back into the water to rescue him. They pull him back to the beach, and they try and save him. They try and give him CPR, but it's too late. Episode 4 was very painful to sit through. We don't learn anything we didn't know before. There were no surprises in this episode. It really feels like they just took out all of the eventful happenings in a novel, and just took out all of the details, all of the nuance, and we just get a series of events, a very sketchy detail of events, and this is nothing, no details to grab onto, nothing to latch onto, nothing to keep interest. There's a few scenes where the camera gets really close to Sacha Baron Cohen and Cate Blanchett's face, like something happens, and then they're thinking, but there's some stupid, condescending narration over the top. They're telling us this is how they're feeling. It's just not necessary. We can tell through the performances how they're feeling and what's happening. So the narration was very annoying in this episode. There's still 3 episodes left of this series, and to be honest, I can't wait for it to be over. Hopefully there's some kind of twists and turns coming, something I haven't seen coming later in the episode to enliven the series a little bit. But yeah, so far, hopefully it's over quickly. Anyway, on to episode 5. Episode 5 is set completely in the present day. There's no flashback scenes in this episode at all. After being kicked out of the family home, Catherine goes to spend some time with her mother. Stephen gets someone to help him to create a fake Instagram account so he can start messaging young Nicholas. This account that Stephen has created is a fake account. It's an account using the photos of his son, Jonathan, and he uses this fake Jonathan account to talk to Nicholas. Stephen also visits Catherine's workplace while she's not there, and he starts handing out the unpublished novel to all of her work colleagues, and he tells everybody that the woman in this novel is actually Catherine. It's a story about her. Stephen tells everybody that Catherine's been harassing him and calling him at his home, and when Catherine, after he leaves, Catherine goes back to work, and she's confronted by her work colleagues. Why are you doing this to this man? Why have you been investigating this man? And there's a big confrontation with her and all of her colleagues, and then one of her colleagues gets in her face, and she kind of like slaps him a little bit, and then she just storms out of the office in a panic. Stephen, using the fake Jonathan Instagram account, he starts talking to Nicholas. He talks over a couple of days, I think, and he eventually he tells Nicholas that this Jonathan person, this fake person, he actually, while in Italy, he saved you when you were a little boy, when you were on holiday with your mother, and he shows the naked photos and everything, and Nicholas gets into a little bit of a panic. Nicholas has a little bit of a nervous breakdown, and he goes to like a junkie apartment that he regularly goes to, and he starts taking drugs. Catherine visits Stephen's home. As Stephen is there, he pretends not to be home, and Catherine keeps banging on the windows and the door, demanding that they talk and demanding that he put a stop to all of this harassment and fake stuff that he's been doing. Okay, this episode was pretty entertaining, I have to admit, but not in a necessarily good way. Am I missing something? Nancy found these undeveloped photos. She develops the photos. The photos are of a naked Catherine, and then she thinks that her son was having an affair with Catherine while in Italy, but how can she possibly know that these photos are of Catherine? How can she possibly know that the photos are of the woman at the beach who was with her son when her son went into the water to save Nicholas? It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the details are true, but how can Nancy, when she was writing this unpublished novel, how can she possibly know that? How can she possibly know that Catherine fell asleep on the beach and her son went into the ocean? It's she couldn't just be guessing. Like this is very, very contrived, the story. And why is everybody believing Stephen? Why is everybody believing this unpublished novel? Like it doesn't Catherine have any? She's like a real well-respected person. Has a well-respected career. Like suddenly this novel and these pictures come, and her husband and her work colleagues believe them, and they don't even ask any questions. I understand Robert being upset because he saw the photos of his naked wife, and his wife was cheating on him. So I understand that part, but everybody else, her work colleagues, her son, they are judging her for no reason. It's very strange. The scene at Catherine's workplace where she storms out and there's an altercation between her and her colleagues. This was very embarrassing to watch. Like some of the young colleagues, they're yelling at her, you're cancelled," but nobody comes to defend her. Everybody just believes this Stephen person. Everybody believes everything in the novel. It's very strange scene, very overblown scene, and so many of the events in the novel. There's just no way Stephen and Nancy could have possibly known so much of the details. Anyway, on to episode 6. Episode 6 opens with Nicholas in a car driving to the hospital, and he's been dumped at the hospital. The door car's open, and some junkies just throw him at the front of the hospital. Catherine quickly rushes back to the family home because she received a phone call from Nicholas early in the morning, a very distressed phone call. So she goes back home and she tries to find where he is. And while at home, he wakes up Robert, who's sleeping in the bed. And then once he's awake, they go through his room and stuff, and they get a phone call from the hospital, and they go to the hospital. We get some flashback scenes that what's in the novel necessarily didn't happen, and a lot of the flashback scenes that we saw in previous episodes never actually happened. In episode 1, we're introduced to that obnoxious London couple who are holidaying in Italy, and we're told in episode 1 that Sasha went home because there was a death in the family, but actually we find out that Sasha went home because she was had a big fight with Jonathan, and she decided to go back home. We find out that a lot of the details in the unpublished, or now it's published novel, Nancy made up a lot of the details, and most of the flashbacks in previous episodes were based on these fabricated details in the novel. So actually, most of the flashbacks we see in previous episodes never actually happened. The interactions with the young Catherine and Jonathan at the beach, at the bar, at the hotel, never actually happened. Anyway, that's according to Catherine. Back in the present time, Stephen visits Nicholas in hospital where he's connected to a whole bunch of machines. And while Nicholas is lying there, Stephen tries to poison him with some, like a little tube, a little syringe, while he's lying there in hospital. Catherine walks into the room just in time to stop Stephen from doing anything to Nicholas. And there's a very stupid, very overblown, very silly scene where Catherine pushes Stephen away, and the hospital staff rush into the room, and they all take Stephen's side, even though he's an old man. Catherine they never give a chance for Catherine to explain what happened, and it's a very, very silly scene. And the final scene in episode 6 is Catherine visiting Stephen's house in the middle of the night. She breaks into she smashes a window or smashes a door, and Stephen wakes up. He goes downstairs and he sees Catherine standing outside in the backyard, and she has some kind of knife or piece of glass in her hand, and she demands to come inside, and that's the end of the episode. This episode was fairly entertaining thanks to the events and the very good performances, but a lot of the events, a lot of the information we find out just makes me feel cheated and misled, and makes me feel like so much what happened in previous episodes did never happen, and like, did I waste my time? Again, the narration, especially in the first half of the episode, was very, very condescending, very, very annoying. Why do we have to continually be told every scene how they're feeling, how they're feeling? We don't need to be told how they're feeling. We can see. We just let us make up our own mind. I don't understand why this series insists on everybody being so much against Catherine for no reason. I understand that this advances the story, but it just seems far-fetched and ridiculous. I don't understand how anybody can believe this. The flashbacks that we all saw in the first 4 episodes or 5 episodes, we find out that most of them never happened. Some of the details may be true, but the majority of the flashbacks were all made up, and we were told that we were basically led to believe that the flashbacks were real events. We were never told that the flashbacks were told from the point of view of the novel, and to find out that the flashbacks maybe never happened, and then they're from nobody's point of view, it just makes me feel cheated and I wasted my time. There's just 1 episode left, and we get some details in the final scene that I think the last episode is probably not going to be very eventful. It's probably going to go by the numbers, but anyway, on to episode 7, the final episode, finally. Okay, finally, episode 7. Okay, I was wrong a little bit. There was a big twist that I didn't see coming in this final episode. Okay, the episode 7 starts off where the last episode finished. Catherine and Robert are sitting in his dining room in the early hours of the morning, and Catherine still is holding like the knife or the glass in her hand, and she's kind of like a little bit threatening, and she starts to tell her story of what happened when they were in Italy, and we find out that actually somehow they never when the flashbacks when young Catherine, never really had a conversation with Jonathan. They kind of looked at each other, a little bit of a flirty look, but they never really talked to each other. Apparently, the scene at the bar never happened, and we find out somehow Jonathan got the key to her room, and when he goes into her room, he brutally rapes her for 3.5 hours, and she explains this to Stephen, but Stephen doesn't believe her, and we find out that actually Catherine starts to find that while she's sitting at the dining table, she starts to get a little bit woozy, and we find out that Stephen has drugged her tea, and Catherine starts to pass out a little bit, and she passes out to the floor, and Stephen quickly gets his stuff and rushes to the hospital because he wants to attempt to poison young Nicholas again while he's in hospital. Catherine wakes up after some time, and she wakes up in a panic and, oh no, I have to get to the hospital before something happens. And so they're both racing to the hospital. They're both in a taxi in traffic trying to get to the hospital before the other person. Once Stephen gets to the hospital, he gets there first. He goes into the room. He has a syringe with poison in it, and he goes to poison Nicholas while he's lying in there. But he stops at the last moment because I think he's thinking about the story that Catherine told him earlier at the house, and he's thinking, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was wrong about everything. And he has like a sudden revelation. Maybe he's thinking about his son and his character, and maybe there was some signs before his son went to Italy that he's an aggressive person, or maybe he is the kind of person that who would do such a thing, who would sexually assault somebody. And Catherine gets to the hospital, and Robert's there as well. And Stephen has already explained to Robert the whole story. And Stephen leaves the hospital, and Robert apologizes to Catherine. Why didn't you tell me what happened in Italy? You never told me? You never told me. And before Stephen leaves, Robert races to the elevator and asks him, why didn't you tell me about this? And I just found out. And Robert says to him, how can you believe what's in the novel is true? Why, you never had any doubts? And then Stephen says to him his final line in the series. He says to Robert, why didn't you ever believe your wife? Why did everybody doubt her? The final couple of scenes in the series is Catherine goes into the hospital room, and like Robert and Catherine and Nicholas, they have kind of like a family moment. They hug, and Nicholas seems to be okay. And we see a scene of Stephen back at his home. He's made a campfire in his backyard, and he's burning all the novel, and he's burning the photographs, and he throws the photographs into the fire. But he quickly grabs one of the photos, and he looks at it very closely, and he can see that young Nicholas was standing near the bed in the same room while Jonathan was raping and sexual assaulting his mother. So he witnessed everything, and I guess that would explain why his character throughout the series, and explain why Nicholas was always very distant with his mother. Disclaimer: the series is directed by Alfonso Cuarón, and this is his first TV series. He has directed films such as Children of Men, Gravity, and Pan's Labyrinth. Okay, my final thoughts on this series. Yes, there was some details in the final episode I didn't see coming, but I just felt like that using the different time periods, messing up the time periods, using fake flashbacks, just prolongs the story. I just feel like once we get the whole story in the first two episodes, episode 3, 4, 5, 6, were very tedious. We already knew all the details. We thought we all knew all the details. And once we find out everything in episode 7, we're supposed to feel everything's supposed to feel okay. Now we understand everything, but for me, I just didn't feel satisfied. I just felt cheated. There's absolutely no character development in this series. Everything is in this. What happens in the episodes is based on the events. We know nothing about Catherine. We just know what her job is. We know nothing about Robert. We just know what his job is. There's actually like a very short subplot about Robert. He looks over some kind of charity organizations, and then in one of the episodes it goes on to like a little bit of a subplot, but then it goes nowhere, and that's basically all we know about Robert. And the son, Nicholas, he's a drug problem, and he works at a shop and he gets fired, and basically that's all we know about him. Stephen was a school teacher. That's all we know about him. His wife, I guess she was a housewife. She stayed at home. She died of cancer. We know nothing about him. There's just very, very little character development. And of course, the main complaint I had after every episode was the narration. Very condescending, very unnecessary. Just so many scenes of Stephen and Catherine and Jonathan and Nicholas and Robert just staring and reacting to the events. And then we get this narration telling us, oh, Robert is very stressed. Robert is upset. Robert is upset. His wife cheated on him. Well, we don't need that. It's just not necessary. Okay, for me, the positives in this series, the performances. Kate Blanchett in the final episode, I thought she was very good, but in earlier episodes, I just thought she was a little bit too over the top with the mannerisms and the panic and everything. But the final episode, she was very strong. I really liked Sacha Baron Cohen as Robert. His character is very underdeveloped, but he does the best with what he's got. Kevin Kline as Stephen, I really didn't like. He's very over the top with his old man performance. Like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do. It's just very cringy. I really didn't like Kevin Kline's performance. I usually like him in everything, but his performance in this episode, in this series was very, very unsubtle. And finally, probably my favorite performance in the series is Leslie Manville as Nancy. She really, really hits those emotional highs, and her scenes were probably amongst the most entertaining in the series. I give disclaimer the series 2 stars out of 5. I just felt like the payoff at the end wasn't very satisfying. I just felt cheated, and it was very tedious to sit through the first 5 or 6 episodes because we already knew all the details, and once we find out that most of the details are not true, we're supposed to feel like shocked and satisfied, but I just felt cheated and like I wasted my time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and like the video. See you next time. Bye.